So welcome to this first WSR event of the year, and this is one of the most important events, something that we've been working for months, and we rescheduled this a couple of times because this is our opportunity to celebrate 55 years of women's studies in hosted by GTU, which is the longest such running program in this country. We are ahead of Harvard in this regard, and we have evidence. That's Dr. Holder, who has this institutional memory of that.
That process.
Well, I didn't mean it that way. But because you're a historian, you have paid attention to the details and things and all that stuff. So 55 years of women's studies. And right now I'd like to first introduce the committee members who are here. We have a Women's Studies in Religion Steering Committee. We meet every month, and we are not only planning for events, but we are mentoring and sharing and trying to find ways to keep women's studies, gender studies, sexuality studies in the forefront and find different ways to do that. So I'm going to ask all the committee members, please introduce yourselves and say your name and school. But first, my co-chair, Dr. Deidre Green, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Deidre Green. I'm here at the GTU and I'm honored to get to serve as co-chair of Kirsi this year.
Hi, I'm Angela Lintz Small. I'm a PhD student in contemporary Buddhist studies, and I'm really delighted to be here and welcome you all.
I'm Diane Saunders, and I'm PhD student in culture and history and concentration art and religion. And I previously served as the program coordinator for WSR for 3 years.
Laura Jean Torgerson, Associate Professor of New Testament at Berkeley School of Theology.
I'm Cheryl Johnson, she, her pronouns. I teach at Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary.
And on Zoom, we have committee members there, at least 2.
Hi,
Katie Dyer.
I'm Katie Dyer Willis. I'm a second year MDiv student at PLTS.
Dr. Paula.
I'm Paula Nesbitt. I'm a visiting professor of sociology of religion and delighted to be part of WSR.
Good. And then we have SAC, the European Student Association Committee, who are co-sponsoring this event with labor embodied in this one person very much.
Hello, I'm Xin, a fourth year PhD student doing homiletics.
And graduated this program last year. Yes. But,
Oh, yes, I got certificates in May.
yeah.
2020. What's last year? 5.
Yes. Did I miss it? Right. Okay. If people do not know who these gentlemen are, would you like to introduce yourself to our guys?
Uriah Kim, president, was a student from 98 to 2004, and I still remember Sherry Kirk-Dugan was the director of the program at the time, and she was such a charismatic and dynamic, individual, and I still remember her introducing this program during the orientation.
First off, Professor of History of Christianity.
And while they're not members of the committee, but the ladies in the back.
Hi, I'm Shelley. I'm Dr. Ocker's assistant, and this is Angela's lead. I'm the manager.
Thank you for everything you do. We know it's a lot. We have many programs to support. So, I was hoping Valerie Miles Triple would be here, but she's not here now. We wanted to give her a gift and belated thanks for the magnificent lecture she gave last fall on birthing hope, which is a theme we are continuing with our student conference. But now, so this is what's happening now. We're going to have time with Dr. Arthur Holder, who was to be introduced by Raya. Raya is not here yet, so
Raya's community health.
okay. But after Dr. Arthur speaks, we will have a short intermission and we will get food. We have wonderful food and delights to eat. And during the intermission, Angela will tell us a little bit about the archival research that she and Raya have done and prepared us a PowerPoint presentation that's available today and later. And then when time seems right, Diane and Dr. Cheryl will introduce the interviews with the alumni that became a bigger project than we thought, a happily bigger project. And then we will end with discussion, either on tables or on circles or together. And Angela will conclude us about a little bit before 7. Any questions? No? And then Dina Aronoff, also a member of our committee. Dina, how you wrote that? Nice to see. Oh, and so, Dr. Duke, we had an announcement about.
Yeah, as a continuation of the theme of Dr. Miles Pibble's talk earlier this year, Birthing Hope, we'll be adopting the same theme for our student conference this year. So on April 22nd, students will have an opportunity to present an academic paper, present projects, whatever suits you. The presentations will be 15 to 20 minutes. So you can read more about the theme here. We've also got some flyers on that back table that you can take. So please consider writing a proposal and submitting it by March 11th. And this will be a Zoom-only conference, which we're hoping will facilitate wider participation. Right?
Okay. So now, I am not Raya, but it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Arthur Holder, who when I came here 10 years ago, you and Christopher Arthur and writing with a very friendly community who welcomed me in this community. And we've been colleagues for 10 years, and you're a medievalist who also served as a dean for a long time here, and we've been involved with this program in many ways. So we are very honored that you will came from your retirement to give us some of your thoughts. So welcome.
I'm not sure where's the best place to be, but especially for everybody on the screen. Let's see.
Can you all see?
Is this good? Can you see here? Okay. Yeah, so first of all, I want to acknowledge the irony of having me being the first speaker here as a white male professor. A lot of people might say that I represent the problem that women's studies and religion was created to solve. And as a white male administrator, I know there are many people who would say that I at least represent as a class one of the main obstacles that women's studies and religion has had to overcome. And so I want to acknowledge that and to say I'm billed as the keynote speaker, but I'm really the warm-up act. The real program tonight is the video interview that you're going to see with former directors and faculty and students from the program over the years. And I've seen a preview and it's really terrific. And don't want to take too much time to get you there. I'm really happy to be here because I have been an enthusiastic supporter of this program over the years. And I hope, especially during my time as dean, to have been mostly a helpful ally for those who are doing this really important work. My comments are really more of an introduction and overview of the history, and in some ways, that is to lead into the video that you're going to see. So some of the things I'm not going to do are all the fun part. I'm not going to call the roll of all of the great women who have been creating this program and who have come out of this program and talking about their accomplishments. You'll hear some of that in the interview. And I'm not going to try to do like a detailed history. There's wonderful resources that are available on the GTU website and in the archive section of the website, so you can look those things up for yourself. But for if you really want to get into this, the thing to do is to get a hold of a copy of the book Feminist Theology's Legacy and Prospect. Feminist Theology's Legacy and Prospect, that was edited by Rosemary Radford Ruther. It came out of a conference here in 2005, and it has wonderful articles in there about the history of women's studies at the GTU and commentary and critical analysis of that as well. It's just, it's a treasure. I don't know if it's still in print, but there are copies around, so you should get those. So I just want to kind of structure my brief remarks according to the three names that women's studies has had at the GTU over the years. And I see representatives from all of these eras on. Great to see good friends there on Zoom as well. So it's been called three different things. It began as the Office of Women's Affairs, and then the Center for Women in Religion, and now the Women's Studies in Religion program. I just kind of want to talk about each of those titles really and what they might represent. First of all, even though it had different titles, it didn't mean that the work of the center or the program changed dramatically, in the sense that always throughout, whether it was an office or a center or now a program, faculty, staff, students have offered an amazing array of courses and workshops and conferences and publications, including the Journal for Women in Religion, mentoring opportunities, and I think quite a few parties along the way as well. But the sequence of name changes may tell us something about shifts in emphasis anyway, and about the changing context. So first, the Office of Women's Affairs, which was the name from 1970 to 1976. In higher education, the creation of an office is often a designation of an institutional response to a perceived need, especially a need that was perceived on the part of students in response to that. So an office, whether it's a physical space or a space in the school's imaginary, it implies there's important work to be done. That's what you do in an office, right? You do work. And it's worth noting that the GTU administration, the GTU as an institution, did not create the Office of Women's Affairs. It was, when it began in 1970, more of a grassroots initiative. And it was only 4 years later that there was official recognition by the GTU as what they call sponsorship of that office. In the 1975 catalog of the GTU, there's this description, and I think it says a lot about the history. The Office of Women's Affairs, a sponsored agency of the GTU, came into being when women seminarians, faculty, lay, and clergy became increasingly concerned about the role of women within the life of the church and theological communities today. So it grew out of women who were concerned. And I think that that has carried through. It wasn't just somebody saying, well, this would be an interesting thing to say. But there has always been a sense that women's studies at the GTU is responding to, if not sometimes a crisis, sometimes a concern, sometimes an opportunity, but really an opportunity to get something done. The catalog then, again, this is in 1976, stated the aims and the intents of the office with verbs that reflected an emphasis on advocacy. Just kind of briefly, just summarize what it says. First of all, raising the status of women in the church, alerting seminaries to their responsibility for women students, marshaling the energies of seminary women, alerting the GTU community to its responsibility for the seminary spouse, who was apparently presumed to be female. Encouraging denominations to employ and minister to all persons, creating a national network, and working for wholeness in the individual, the church, the academic community, and the world. So these verbs are all about, I would say, advocacy, about calling attention, about trying to raise awareness and then to cultivate constructive action. But by 1975, the Office of Women and Women's Affairs had what they called a program arm that was called the GTU Women's Center. which had actually an office. And it was founded, the catalog again says, on the belief that women need a place as well as a voice in which to meet each other to develop projects and ideas. I think that's another part of the history that is carried through all the way. A place for women and their voices to be heard in speech, to use Neil Morton's famous phrase. That's been the fundamental work of not so much, the conferences, the lectures, the books, all those things, but that a place and space for women to be heard into speech. The next year, in 1976, came the renaming to the Center for Women and Religion. And I think that adoption of center language brought more emphasis, at least institutionally, on programming. An office has affairs, but a center puts on programs. And the title for the leadership of the center eventually shifted from coordinators to director. So there was we used to have a lot of coordinators around GTU, just in the women's program, but a lot of everybody we're all coordinating, but who's in charge here? And so I think there's kind of that was part of the maturing of the GTU as an institution to be able to say, okay, maybe somebody should, be the director. I'd also note the addition of the word religion, the Center for Women and Religion, so that the organization's title no longer just kind of assumed, because it's at the GTU, it must be about religion, but that really bringing together these concerns about women and religion. And there was also a growing awareness that the work needed to be interreligious, not just focused, as that early language was, on Christian seminaries and the churches. So certainly by the mid-70s, that was a turn. So having a center for women in religion appeared, I think, and to put the Center for Women in Religion in the category of other GTU centers. But in fact, there was no meaningful category. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of centers at the GTU in the mid-70s and in the 80s, but no two of them had the same kind of institutional structure or the same relationship to the GTU as an institution. Some of them were founded and funded by the GTU, like the Center for Jewish Studies. Others were independent, self-supporting, affiliated organizations like the Center for Theology and the Natural Sciences, as it was then, before it became a part of the GTU. They were affiliated but independent. And then some of the centers were research institutes, like the Center for the Study of New Religious Movements, which was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. So there are lots of different ways in that period to be a center at the GTU. And I think CWR's position in the institutional structure was often unclear, even to those who were most involved in that and the leadership of the GTU itself. I mean, member schools, which kind of center is it? Is it ours, or is it that is the GTU's, or is it its own thing that we have a relationship with? And this was a matter of confusion, but I think, and also of frustration throughout that period. And you'll hear more about it in the video as the evolution of that became toward clarity. But the center as requiring the kind of staffing and financial support that was, and this is, you'll hear again more about this, and there are people on the screen here who know a lot more about this than I do, but the funding had come from several different sources, and particularly from the member schools, from the GTU, but also from a very substantial quasi-endowment that was running down. The closing of the Center for, and I'm looking at Cheryl here, the closing of the Center for Women in Religion was something we went through together, and it was a difficult time. And again, you'll hear some more about that. But it was also a time of reconfiguration and rebirth. That conference in 2005 really kicked some things off. And there were, out of that came what we now know as the women's, the WSR, the Women's Studies and Religion program. And again, the choice of that name was intentional. Yes, women's and religion, but studies put in there. And so in that period in the mid-70s, the group of women faculty who really developed the proposal for that program wanted to put the academic focus in sharp play and to say, you know, studies needs to be in there. Women in religion, yes, but in between there should be studies. And also the shift from a center to a program, while recognizing the change in the organizational structure. So as you heard Dr. Stjerna say earlier, since 2006, WSR has been led by a steering committee composed of both faculty and staff and students, with one or more faculty chairs and one or more student program coordinators. Over the years, the evolution of this dynamic program has mirrored and in many ways shaped the issues and the dynamics of women's studies and religion, not only around the country, but around the world. The names, the structures, the programs, the funding sources have changed over time, but the purpose has been consistent: to give both space and voice to women in the work of theological and religious studies. There have been some recurrent tensions, often creative, sometimes difficult. Tension between providing a safe space for women and the aspiration to enhance the production of scholarship by and about women. And yes, you can do both of those things at the same time. And yes, they are often mutually enhancing. But when you're making decisions about, with limited time, resources, and energy, where do we put the emphasis? There has a tension there. The tension between the hope to change the GTU and the need for institutional support from the GTU. And so that has often put women's studies in the position of saying, we think things need to be different, be done differently. We think we need circles, not rows. We think we need a collaborative structure of leadership rather than having this, the kind of traditional organizational chart and a hierarchy. We think that classroom dynamics need to start from where people are and their own experience rather than the professor coming in and saying, here's what you need to know today. All of those kinds of pedagogical, organizational, cultural critiques and alternatives to the institution have borne fruit. I mean, there have been changes at the GTU that happened because of the work of those involved in women's studies. But with that also comes, you have to step on some toes. You have to make some noise. You have to be frank about the problems that you see. And then you have to ask those same people for money. And I get that. As that book that I mentioned from the 2005 conference does a wonderful job of kind of exploring the different theologies, the different forms of theology and philosophy, feminist, womanist, mujerista, and how those interact. And there has tension in the sense of, yes, everyone affirms all of those different perspectives, but how do you hold them all together at the same time? And then other intersectionalities of race, ethnicity, religion, gender identity, and so on. So all through this, through the changes, through the struggles of the productive output of women's studies at the GTU has really been amazing. You'll hear from Angela more about the archives and what's in here. And you'll see represented in the video. And just not only what has happened here on campus, but what the people, particularly the women who have been here involved in these programs, have gone on to do here and elsewhere has just been, as I said, truly amazing. Now we're in another period in which there are major changes happening at the GTU. Seems like we're always going to change, all right? I'm a historian. We do change. And changes in curriculum, changes in financial resources, changes in the student body, changes in the consortial structure. And all of those things are impacting, as you would expect, the Women's Studies program. The next chapter of the story of women's studies at GTU is still to be written, and it's probably going to look somewhat different from anything that's come before. But as ever, there is a lot of creativity, resilience, and visionary imagination around the GTU these days. And so we look for the good work of the past 55 years to continue for a long time to come. There is definitely still a need. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Angela Lintz Small. Again, I want to thank you for coming. My peer, Raya Hazimi, who's ill today, unfortunately couldn't participate, had a great idea. For the 55th, what if we went into the archive, there are 27 boxes, and made a visual presentation? So first I want to thank archivist David Stiver and archive assistant Pablo Vasquez. Pablo brought up all 27 boxes for me. Just a reflection about archive work. Archives are normally muted or silent on the lived experiences, viewpoints, and activities of subjugated groups. Yet our archives are a rich symphony of voices to testify to women's experiences, perspectives, agency as practitioners, leaders, researchers, and teachers. In 1976, the Center for Women in Religion had a starting budget of $43,000. And in 1986, the budget was nearly $92,000. What did we do with those resources? We hosted symposia and conferences. We hosted artists and artwork. We hosted retreats. We published a feminist studies bibliography and curricula to facilitate the teaching of women's studies and religion. And we started a newsletter and then a journal. We participated in direct actions like the protest for the ratification of ERA against apartheid. We did a lot more together for social justice, for women and people of color. And I think we had a lot more fun. So as hopefully I couldn't get it to roll before we got started. Hopefully at the end we can get it to roll. But they're just images of all the meetings and conferences, for instance, women of the decade. Maybe earlier on in the landing, maybe you saw the picture of Alice Walker. She was in the Center for Women in Religion house for an event. I saw that she was there in the pictures and I was like, oh, these are really precious pictures. And then I went to find in the documents, I still haven't found exactly what she did on that event, but she's again in the minutes, in the board meeting minutes, in December 1984, she was with us in November of 1984 saying they were glad she came. So again, there's lots of work to be done with our archives. Of course, with the images, I really strove to find diverse images, in leadership and in the early days, also among the participants. It's predominated by white women, but that changes over time. And so you see Cheryl Kirkduggan here, she'll be in the documentary singing. again, Soul to Soul had a lot of events. So, and this emphasis, of course, we still have today on teaching and learning. We'll have our student conference on the 22nd of April. We still hold that passion. And again, when I saw this, I was really moved. So Chicago, Illinois had a chance to lower the barrier for ratification. The governor was against that. So we went with other women around the country in 1982 to support ERA. We still don't have full equality under the law, but again, WSR was there. Our retreats. So it was a really moving experience. I have way more questions than I have answers. This next slide is particularly moving. I had never thought of the possibility. Could you move? Yeah, this one. The idea of the naked suffering Christ as a woman, as a Krista, right? It's powerful, right? We're so desensitized to seeing a male body up there completely revealed, that our bodies are often for global conflicts, for regional conflicts, even in our domestic arenas, torn naked, we suffer, right? So I want to thank again the archivists and I can't remember quite what's on the next one, but probably thanking all of you and noting this celebration, and then telling you all about our event coming up in April. Please support it. Please students.